All right. So can you tell me about Kingdom of the Sun?
Kingdom of the Sun, yeah. Kingdom of the Sun was this really cool, epic Disney musical that had been developed by Roger Allers, director of The Lion King, and something he was directing. I started at Walt Disney Feature Animation in 1995 on as a story artist on Tarzan, and Roger was, I believe, very early in the development process at that point. And then probably about maybe a year or so into story work on Tarzan, uh, several of my colleagues who were also story artists on Tarzan rolled off of that movie onto Kingdom of the Sun. So I'm sure I have my dates wrong, but I'm going to guess story probably started really ramping up 96, 97, somewhere in there. But yeah, it was epic. It was big. It was lots of elements, great music, pretty cool.
And tell me about how the shift from Kingdom of the Sun to the Emperor's New Groove came about and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I sort of I watched the shift happen a bit from afar
Yeah.
because I wasn't working on the movie for most of the time it was in story. But I do recall, I believe that while I was working on Tarzan, they must have had one or two storyboard screenings of Kingdom of the Sun. Um, and then around, let's see, around 98, like after late summer 98, I rolled off of Tarzan. I was done with Tarzan finally. And not finally like it was a bad experience, but like I'd been on it for a long time.
Yeah.
So I rolled off of Tarzan and I wanted to go on to this other film that was in development, but the studio said we need you to go on to Kingdom of the Sun to help out for this screening that's coming up in a couple weeks. And I said, okay, because you sort of have to do that because they ask you to do that. So I worked on an opening song. I think it was the full version of Walk the Llama Llama, that song that we all know and love now.
Yeah.
um, but I worked on some revisions with another friend of mine for that screening, and then fully assumed that once that screening happened, I was going to then go move on to this other movie that I really wanted to work on. Um, but instead, what happened was they screened the movie in the theater. Then we all marched up to the story room as on the third floor, as is always the case with these screenings, and went up to the story room on the third floor to get notes. And so we all sat down, they closed the door, and the two heads of the studio, Peter Schneider and Tom Schumacher, looked around the room and said, "Can you hear this airplane going over?
Oh, sweet. Sorry.
Could you hear that?"
No, yeah, I didn't hear an airplane, but I got a Facebook notification from someone else who's interested in an interview. So
Oh, okay, cool, cool. I wanted to pause in case that you could hear that outside. Okay, anyways. So the two heads of the studio, Peter Schneider and Tom Schumacher, looked around the room, said, "I'd like to thank all of you for all of your work on the screening, for getting it to this point. And now we'd like to ask you to leave because we'd like to talk with Roger Allers and Mark Dindal, who was at the time co-directing the movie." And everybody was like, "Oh, that's not good. That doesn't usually happen." So we all stood up and left the room. And then before you know it, we found out that they were very unhappy with the screening and did not want to go forward with the movie in that version. So then they decided they wanted Roger to try to come up with a new version of his movie, Kingdom of the Sun, that addressed the executive notes that they felt weren't being addressed so up to this point. And then they split Mark off on his own to develop his own totally different take on the material. And ultimately, both ideas were pitched, and of course, they went with Mark's idea, and that was what Emperor's New Groove became. And I never got to work on that other movie that I wanted to work
I'm
on.
sorry.
Oh no, it's quite all right. It's quite all right.
And
It's all good because then they offered me the head of story job on Groove, and I was happy to take that. So,
and sorry, there's a dog barking if you can hear it.
no, no.
All right. And during that process where it sort of became Dindle, more Dindle thing, in the middle it was called Kingdom in the Sun
Mm-hmm.
for a little bit, and there were
Yeah,
some characters that people pitched in the village and stuff, and some that got cut. Can you talk a little bit about some of those?
yeah. The biggest difference in the version in the Kingdom in the Sun version from the Emperor's New Groove version was that in the second act, Cusco stayed in Pacha's village. They didn't go on the road back to the palace. None of that stuff happened. It wasn't a road movie yet. So instead, it was like an episode of the Andy Griffith Show or The Office or something, where you just meet these bunch of weird, eccentric characters that live in Pacha's village, and they all drive Cusco absolutely bananas because they're super sweet, but they're just weird, and he just wants to get out of there and get back to the palace and change back into a human. There was a kind of I don't remember if she became a love interest for Cusco,
It's
but there
Mada,
was a young, what's that?
Mada, I think.
Mata. Yeah, thank you. I was trying to remember her name. And at the time, that '70s show was a big show on TV, and they actually cast Laura Prepon, who's in that show and went on to be in Orange is the New Black and that kind of thing. They cast her as the voice and did have a recording session with her because it had not actually gone that far, but she got cut. The most infamous character that was in this version was this character named Mochi, who was voiced by Adam West, who was recorded. Didn't get him, actually got Adam West in to be recorded as well. And Mochi was uh, so Cusco meets Mochi, and Mochi says, "I know who you are. I know you're the emperor." And Cusco's a llama at this point. So,
Yeah.
um, but Cusco believes this, like, oh my gosh, somebody that's actually going to help me. And Mochi says, I'm going to get you back to the palace and we're going to change you back, Your Highness. I know. And Cusco's like, this is my ticket out, but he keeps it a secret from Pacha because he's like, I'm just going to get in league with this guy and then I'm going to blow this place and get back. So he meets up officially with Mochi, and you find out that Mochi's a complete lunatic and actually, thinks other animals are the emperor and has this whole committee of people around his table in his hut, but they're actually mannequins, like stuffed, scarecrow heads and things like that. So then Cusco's like, how am I gonna get out of here? So he thought like his one big chance he thought he had to get out turned out to be BS. So he was a really fun character. He was really funny, super wacko.
I actually
But
got to meet Adam West.
you
Um,
did?
yeah. Oh man, and like next year, I think that would have been like a decade ago when I met
Yeah.
him.
He was a really nice man.
Yeah,
They brought him up to the third floor just to kind of meet the story team and just kind of look around and tour him around the building. And he stood in the halls and a bunch of people gathered around him and he just chatted with them. He was really nice.
yeah.
And then I got to work with him years later on Meet the Robinsons, which was really cool.
And then of course, you would have had a movie with Batman and Catwoman.
Yeah. 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 It would have been fun to find a way to like get them together.
Um, what was working with Mark Dindal like?
Mark is pretty amazing. He's one of the most positive, collaborative people I've ever met and ever had the pleasure to work with. He loves to keep things really light and fun. So we were always goofing off, and as is indicated in the Sweatbox documentary with chair races and things like that. Um, so he likes to keep things really loose and jokey, and we just have fun making these movies because they do take a lot out of you, and they go on for many years. So we should just have fun. It's kind of his philosophy. Um, and again, he's so collaborative. I really learned a lot from him, uh, the way he directed, and I kind of absorbed a lot of that into my process of directing, where he has an idea for how something could go, but he gives you some real general direction. You come back with your take, and he has this great way of saying, "Oh, that's really cool. Let's synthesize those two things together and create something new, and create, a new idea." Which I thought was great. So he's just really positive, a real embodiment of that yes and philosophy of, like, improv acting,
Improv.
that kind of thing. He loves what you bring to the table. He takes it and he builds on that and incorporates it. So really great to work with.
And of course, then they changed the name to Emperor's New Groove, and that nobody really liked that. And I believe it was you who pitched the "You Threw Off My Groove" scene so that the name would at least make some sense.
Oh yeah, yeah. So we had that scene already where, in the song, the guy, you threw off my groove, and then
Yeah.
sorry, the guy gets kicked out. And that was, from what I remember, that was just a throwaway joke. And then I had worked on a million different versions of the introduction of Pacha at the palace, coming to see Cusco. Um, and somehow we arrived on this notion of, well, what if he meets the guy that got thrown out of the window?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, then that led to that
And then
notion of,
he's okay.
yeah, exactly, yeah, he's okay. And then, yeah, you can kind of reinforce that groove idea. So yeah, that was fun. It was fun to do.
Did you get to meet the cast? And well, I guess you did. You talked about Adam West. So what was it like working with the cast?
Yeah, as head of story, obviously Mark directed the actors, but I sat in on the sessions just to observe and kind of, hear how things went. And they were all just lovely. As head of story, I didn't really feel like I wanted to, assert myself too much. I just kind of stayed in the background and observed. But gosh, they were all really nice. Sitting at a table eating lunch with Eartha Kitt was just like super cool. John got to pitch a sequence to John Goodman, who I ended up working with later on Monsters at Work. But also very kind. David Spade was what you would think David Spade is. Nice. He wasn't mean to anybody, but he a little pricklier than some of the other folks. With all due respect to him. And Patrick Warburton also is. It's funny because they're all exactly what you would think they would be. Their personas are like, that's them. Except Eartha Kitt is not cat. She's not evil like Catwoman. But yeah, they all kind of have that similar vibe to themselves as human beings. But everyone was very lovely and really seemed to enjoy themselves working on the movie.
And as I understand it, the movie's marketing was a bit lackluster, and the company didn't really know how to promote it.
Yeah, we were a little frustrated with that. We thought which was kind of typical of a lot of the movies during that time period, where we thought you guys could do a little bit better than that. What I remember, the challenge on that one too, was the studio had two big movies that holiday. The first was 102 Dalmatians, and then the second was Groove. And what I had heard, I don't know if this is true, but this is kind of what I'd heard through the grapevine, is that the company looked at both movies and they chose 102 Dalmatians to back 100%, because they thought that would be that movie we know how to market, because you got puppies, you got, it's a sequel to a really popular movie from a few years ago. They felt like that's a slam dunk. We know how to do that. And then as a result, Groove sort of, got something,
Busy.
but didn't get something as exciting as what we would hoped. You would kind of think, well, you have two movies, why wouldn't you just market them both. Why don't you just push them both at the
Yeah.
same, level? But they didn't. So, oh well.
Did you ever imagine that the film would have this sort of cult following that it has now?
No, I never imagined it would have that kind of cult following. I thought, it didn't do very well. I recall that one of the executives at the time had said, "We're never going to make another movie like that again," because they felt like it was too small, too niche. Like it's a comedy, it's a cartoon. Like it is a cartoon, and because it didn't do well, the feeling was it was too limited. Like the audience for that type of movie was too limited, and we'll never do that again. And I just thought, yeah, it's just gonna fade away, and maybe there'll be somebody who remembers it, but at the time, I mean, there was home video, and movies did last, but it was sort of hard to imagine. You didn't have the internet, we didn't know what memes were, we didn't know what TikToks were, any of that stuff. It was kind of hard to imagine that other than a theatrical release and home video, that there would be any other life to a movie beyond that.
Yeah.
And if the theatrical didn't go well, you could only hope that people would rent it on VHS. But you know, you never knew if anybody did. You just sort of crossed your fingers that people would discover it on home video. So now cut to years later, and how much it's become part of pop culture. It's crazy. It's insane. It's bizarre, but so neat. It's just so cool that it can be appreciated now in a totally different way.
Yeah. I think I have run out of questions, but we have not been talking for very long.
Yeah,
Uh,
no worries. I'm happy to keep chatting, or if you want to, however you want to do
um,
it.
what I would really love, but I unfortunately don't think I have any way of contacting him, is to get Mark Dindal and interview with Mark Dindal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know he's really busy right now on Garfield. They're sort
Garfield.
of like
Yeah.
really in the thick of production, but I can see if I can get a hold of him and see. Again, I'm not. He may pass just with his schedule right now
Yeah.
being the way it is. But yeah, let me see what I can do. Um, who else have you talked to on?
I well, there's a few exclusively for the documentary. I've so far only talked to Nick Raniere and you, but some of the people who I've got on the podcast that I'm taking little bits of the podcast and putting into the movie.
I
Um,
see.
Tony Bancroft,
Uh-huh.
Bob Bergen,
Hmm. Thought
um,
I heard Stevie Wormers in
Stevie
your
Wormers.
trailer. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I also have JP Manu, who's the guy who they've got to voice Cusco when they couldn't get David Spade for something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like he was in the video game,
Ah,
and I think he said he's not doing. They told him he's not doing it anymore, but in video games and theme parks and TV and stuff, when they needed like House of Mouse or something, when they needed
I see.
Cusco, that was the guy they got. And I hope he doesn't mind this, but as a joke, in documentaries how it says the person's name and then it says their role, and
Yeah.
it says JP Manu, and then under it says not David Spade.
That's funny.
Because if it just said JP Manu, voice of Cusco, that might confuse people.
Right, right. Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. Who else are you looking to get?
I
If you got a
just
list of.
talked with because I'm covering the entire history of the universe. I just got a message from Saul Blinkoff, one of the directors of the
Mm,
direct-to-video sequel,
uh-huh.
saying he was interested in doing an interview. So that would be fun. Because you don't
Oh, I
hear
see.
about that much.
Yeah, I see. So you're gonna do the TV series and the video, direct
Yeah,
to video, the whole thing.
yeah.
Cool.
With a tiny bit at the end about like the merchandise and the little bits of theme park representation they occasionally have.
Right. Yeah. It's funny too, like uh I think it was, shoot, what was it? What was the I don't think it was Redbubble, but it was one of those sites a couple years ago. They had a big slew of Groove stuff. Like they had
Yeah,
a stocking cap, and they had a blanket. And
yeah.
it's funny. I have pillow that's got the vial of,
Yeah.
poison for Cusco thing. It's fun that those things also every now and then little things like that pop up too.
And most recently, the Mirrorverse video game, which is like
Oh yeah.
introduced Cusco, Mirrorverse version of Cusco. So that was really
Yeah.
interesting to see and really exciting.
Yeah, I saw something about that. Um, I'm trying to think of who else I have contacts for that was on the story team. I don't know what other types of, like, what if you're looking for other animators or other folks like that. But
Uh, Now, I do have connections with someone, but I think they're far too busy with a bunch of TV shows and stuff to actually do an interview.
oh,
I am friends, or at least Twitter friends, with Patrick Warburton.
oh yeah.
Yeah, and I did very briefly get to meet him last year at a con, and fist bumped him.
Yeah.
So that was cool. I wanted to
Yeah, I
visit.
wonder.
I wanted to visit him at his table, but I had not been feeling well, and it was a very crowded con. So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Have you like corresponded with them and said would you interview?
yeah. I've asked him a few times. I haven't gotten a response
Yeah.
via the only responses I've got is him liking tweets about it. I haven't
Uh-huh.
gotten any like direct messages about it or anything, even though I've contacted him. I imagine he's very busy
Right.
because
Yeah.
he's on like Family Guy and all this other stuff, and I don't know how. Like probably pretty often working on that.
Right.
But I would love to have him or interview him either for the documentary or the podcast someday.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Do you I don't think I'm making this up. Wasn't Bob's Ganaway one of the EPs on the show on
Yes, he
Emperor's New
was.
Groove?
Yes, he was. He was one of the executive producers.
Yeah. Have you talked with him at all?
No, I haven't, but I'd love to.
I have his email, and he was our showrunner on Monsters at
Monsters at
Work.
Work.
So I'll try to dig up his email, and I can send him an email, see if he'll talk with you, if that'd be
Yeah, that'd be
helpful.
great.
Yeah. Also, if you need any images, I have a few photos from, like, group photos from some of our nonsense that we did, during the
Yeah, that
making.
would be great too. Yeah.
Or I have I have Xeroxes of a bunch of my sketches. I know they're probably like my story sketches. I'm sure probably not a lot. I don't know if that would come back to haunt you or not if you used any of those, but
I remember on YouTube someone uploaded the entire panel at the 15th anniversary. I
oh
remember
yeah,
watching that. Yeah. Um
because
that was
I have scans of a lot of those doodles. Like,
yeah,
those you could probably use without any kind of copyright issues.
yeah,
So if you ever want any,
yeah,
like, silly gag drawings and stuff, let me
yeah,
know.
yeah. I'm trying to find a balance because I have like there's definitely going to be clips from the movies in there, and I know that I don't own those. So I'm
Right,
hoping that I won't get in trouble because it's gonna. I know some people who have done similar things and seem to have been okay. Um,
right.
like one of the inspirations behind doing a documentary for YouTube is Defunct Land. Recently did a whole documentary on the history of the wand idents on
Oh
Disney
yeah,
Channel,
oh
and they
yeah,
had a lot
yeah,
of footage from Disney Channel and stuff on there that I don't think he went to Disney Channel to ask for.
yeah.
Um, it should technically be fair use, even if it's not because you're using it for educational purposes, but I don't know that it actually
Right.
is.
Are you intending would this be a documentary for YouTube, or would you actually, like, want to get it exhibited in festivals or
I mean, if I could get around my concerns about copyright, I would love that. But right now, I'm mostly just planning to release it on YouTube because I think that's the safest bet.
right? Yeah, I see so many videos about movies, people just talking about movies, and they
Yeah,
use clips from all kinds of movies,
yeah,
and they seem to be able to get away with it. So
yeah. I think it's if they're analyzing them or talking about their history, I think that's should at least it should be protected under the definition of fair use, even if it's
right,
not actually protected. And most of the time, this doesn't necessarily protect you, but most of the time, they're also not doing it for profit. Um,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it seems like if you actually exhibited it in a theater somewhere,
Yeah,
that would probably be a bad thing, but
yeah.
it might come after you.
But on YouTube, I feel like I'm far more concerned about what YouTube would do about it than what Disney would do about it.
Right.
Because I think YouTube has an automated copyright system.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I've talked with other people, and it seems the most likely issue I would have would be just it being taken down, and that
Yeah.
would be it. Um, so I'm not as worried about that as, like, getting sued or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I love your logo, by the way. I think that's really cool.
Oh yeah, my friend Kate Fisher on Facebook made designed the poster. Um, so that was really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of
Awesome.
course, I designed the logo for the podcast itself, which is like just a
Mhm.
little microphone with the Emperor's New Groove with Cusco's frown on it.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Yeah. All right.
All right, awesome. Well, please let me know if you need to talk anymore. Would you like me to send you some images, or do you want
I,
to wait and see how it shakes out as you edit
no,
it?
I would love to see. I would love that.
Okay. Um, I'll gather some stuff and then I'll transfer it to you. At the Is it okay to do the email that you
Yeah.
yeah, I'll get that together in the next couple of days. I'll
Right.
just send a bunch of weird shit. You can see if it's helpful.
All right. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, it was really nice talking with you, Micah. Let me know if I
Thank you.
can help in any other way, and I'll see if I can get in touch with Bob's too.
All right. Thank you.
All right.